Hello and welcome back to our weekly Bible study, continuing in our series on Ecclesiastes. And this week we're looking at Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verses 18 through 23. Continuing the preacher's search, and this week he's looking at the issue of labor or work. Can that provide meaning? Just to recap, we've looked at wisdom, pleasure, and then considered wisdom again, wisdom versus folly. Go ahead and pause the video and read verses 18 through 23, and then we'll jump right on in today. All right, ready? First of all, we can see that once again the preacher is going to talk about labor, but he starts with his conclusion. So in verse 18, he gives us his conclusion about work or labor. So the question is, can labor provide the satisfaction that we desire? And again, I think this is a really interesting question because in our culture, kind of the American culture at large, but especially American religious culture, thinking about the Protestant work ethic, we are taught the importance of hard work. And to many of us, it's a source of pride. It's a source of our identity. And it's very much sometimes part of our religious devotion. And the preacher, though, makes the same conclusion about labor that he makes about pleasure and wisdom, that work, too, is vanity. And he draws out one major problem with labor, just like he did with wisdom, and that is that eventually we're going to die. And that's something we're going to have to face. And a lot of times we work and we build and we amass things, and we don't consider that one day we're going to die. And so the preacher is giving us this shocking conclusion about work in an attempt to wake us up. So let's discuss a couple of the things that he brings out here in this passage about why we put so much value in our work, why we draw so much identity from it. Why do we value our work the way that we do? Well, one of the reasons, you can see this in verse number 21, is that we believe that work is moral and wise. You'll notice he talks about somebody working, and he brings out some things that probably we would value as well. He mentions equity in verse number 21. Somebody working with equity, they're just or a good person because of their hard work. And so we think that work, and we believe that work is moral. And again, I'm not necessarily saying it's not a good thing, but that's one of the reasons why we put so much stock into it. We draw our morality from it. And then he also draws out the fact that it's a wise thing to do, to work. We believe that. And so he mentions in verse 21 somebody who's laboring in wisdom and in knowledge. And so we put a high value on our work, and sometimes we even idolize it because we think it's such a good thing. We also work because of the rewards that it brings, whether it's somebody working to amass a certain amount of money so they can retire, or so they can buy certain possessions. Again, we can see some of these things kind of interlaid as we consider the section on pleasure in chapter 2. But he says in verse 21, he talks about this portion, this reward that we try to amass from our labor. So we put a lot of stock in labor. We think it will bring satisfaction. And these things are true to a certain extent, but they don't erase a very real problem with wisdom, pleasure, and now with work, that eventually we're going to die. And if we're going to die, what's the point of all this hard work? Right? It's such a very temporary thing, and we're working so very hard, and we're really not going to see any of those rewards, right? And so let's talk about these problems with labor. In verse 18, and then again in verse number 21, he mentions that somebody else will receive our reward. And this frustrates the preacher so much. He really kind of screams out that this is not fair, right? Verse 1 says, I hated all my labor which I had taken under the sun, because I should leave it unto the man that shall be after me. This is kind of this unknown person. He doesn't know where his fortune is going to go when he dies. He worked so hard for it, and that is such a frustrating thing to the preacher. And if we really do consider the things that we're working for, all these toys we're trying to amass, this fortune we're trying to gain, right? It's a frustrating thing to consider. We're not taking that with us, and where is it going to go when we die? We don't know. It might go to somebody very foolish who, in our minds, doesn't deserve the things that we worked for. Another thing that he brings out as a problem with labor is that there really is no escape from labor. And so your work really is never done. As soon as you finish one task, you're on to the next one. In verse 23, he really shows how work can consume all of our being, right? Whether it's during the day, he says, days are sorrows and his travail grief, right? So we work hard during the day. It's mentally tasking, it's physically tasking, and we think, well, then we can rest. But when we're really tied up in our labor, the preacher here mentions that even when we go to bed, right, his heart taketh not rest in the night. And so our minds don't cease from our labors. We sit there and we worry, we stress, we check our calendars, we think about all this work that we have piled up. And it's a big problem with labor. It never really satisfies, right? Either because we're not going to be enjoying our reward, or just because it consumes so much of our time and so much of our effort, and there's never a break from it. So, what is the point, right? And again, just to remind you, the preacher is considering work, pleasure, wisdom under the sun, disconnected from God. And so he wants us to wake up to the reality of work under the sun, right? Under the sun, all of your labor really is vanity. It is a breath. It's fleeting, right? It's not permanent. And so why stress for something that is meaningless or empty or just a vapor? Why kill yourself for something that you will never take with you? And so when we think about our work, yeah, it's going to be necessary. We have to survive. There are things God has given us to do. We must do those things. But I think this is a good wake-up call for us to be careful with where we place our identity and what we truly value in life. So often, that's the first question we ask somebody when we meet them. What do you do, right? So much of our identity is tied into our labor. I think the preacher would wake us up to that reality and have us question that. And then as we see that work under the sun doesn't provide the meaning that we want, it would then spur us on to look for some true rest and to find labor that has eternal impact. And so I believe this is pushing us to seek rest in the one who truly does give rest. In Hebrews 4, in verses 9 through 11, we see that Jesus gives true rest. It says in verse 9, "There remaineth therefore a rest to the people of God. For he that is entered into his rest, he also hath ceased from his own works, as God did from his. Let us labor therefore to enter into that rest, lest any man fall after the same example of unbelief." And so let's remember that work for the Lord Jesus Christ will not be in vain. And that even if I'm busy, if I have the right perspective on work, if I'm laboring for Jesus, I can find rest in him every day. And then I can enjoy life. It doesn't have to be a grief. Even if it's hard, even if it's laborious, I can lay my head on my pillow at night, know I'm connected with the Lord Jesus Christ. I can find true rest in him. We'll talk more about this on Sunday. I think it's a really good opportunity for us to kind of question some of our preconceived notions about work and where we find our identity. So check out the description for some discussion questions, and we'll see you on Sunday as we continue on in our series on Ecclesiastes. God bless you. We'll see you next time.